Good evening, everyone. My name is Moulton. I'm the Senior Curator of Exhibitions at the Utah Museum of Contemporary Art. And I just want to quickly thank Art Basel Miami Beach for this invitation to do this talk. And I'm going to give a quick introduction to Alex Israel. I'm going to read it. I apologize. Los Angeles-based artist Alex Israel uses Hollywood as a material to produce videos, objects, performances, and installations. In August at the Utah Museum of Contemporary Art, we showed his recent televisual artwork, As It Lays, which employs the television talk show format as a platform to produce contemporary portraits of rising and falling stars who make up the fabric of LA-ness, each video resulting in an awkward performance of the self. Bret Easton Ellis, Michelle Phillips, Marilyn Manson, Rosanna Arquette, Vidal Sassoon, Ian Ziering, Oliver Stone, and others respond to questions such as, have you ever thrown a party when your parents are out of town? What are the key ingredients for your dream salad? And have you ever been arrested? As It Lays throws red meat to our voracious appetite for celebrity culture. Israel's talk show format and style of questioning brings the camera into a focus that levels the mystique of fame to the everyday existentialism of defining the self through Coke and Pepsi queries. Alex Israel's recent exhibitions include Property, 2011 at Paris Projects in Berlin, the Venice Beach Biennial, the California Biennial in Orange County, the Museo Civico Diocese in Città della Pieve, Italy, Rena Spallings in New York, and most recently at Almin Rec in Paris. He has upcoming exhibitions at Consortium in Dijon and Lax Art in Los Angeles. So I wanted to start this conversation talking a bit about product placement because that seems to be the reason we're all here and is a kind of important element in your work. I got to know of your practice as an artist through a mutual friend of ours, Sam Orlovsky, who's there. And he alluded to the fact that you were making sunglasses, a brand called Freeway. And I guess I wanted to just start off as an introduction to asking what is Freeway eyewear?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I was about to enter graduate school, and I was kind of paralyzed. Like I didn't really know what I was going to do as an artist and what that all meant, and it seemed like a good idea to do something that was just different, that I didn't really know what it was going to be and if it was going to be art or not. And it's a brand that I started called Freeway Eyewear. And I'm from Los Angeles and I grew up there. So sunglasses had always kind of been kind of like a symbol of Los Angeles culture. And I decided this was a product that I could make, and sunglasses were kind of the perfect thing for me to think about because they could have so many metaphorical meanings or readings. And I started working on this project, and I was in grad school, and everyone was like, what are you doing with these sunglasses? But I was convinced that this was something I had to do. And as I kind of developed the project, I realized when it was coming to a conclusion and getting ready to launch in the world, that it wasn't an artwork, that it was just a product. And I kind of had been thinking a lot about artists kind of using their title as artist to take anything and call it art, right? Like this toilet is art, or this dinner party is art, or whatever. Anything could be art. And I decided that I wanted to use my artistness and say, no, this is not art. Like the opposite. Like you can try to make it art, but it's not, and it's just a product in the world. And so that's how Freeway kind of entered the world, as a product. And even though the thinking behind it and the ideas behind it it was very much thematically tied to other things I started making that were art, it was just simply not, and it was important to me that it was just a product. So it was a way of kind of getting over a certain amount of preciousness that everyone had about making things, and that I felt I didn't want to engage with. And at that time, it was just about glasses. So we sold them in stores and in department stores and online, and it continues. And we just made 2 new styles. This is one of the new styles. And here, I'll show you. And I even did in the tradition of like fashion brands of this era. I even did an artist collaboration, and we did a pair with John Baldessari, and it just exists like a normal business, and.
But I like this idea you mentioned. You're operating in other markets. It really is quite reminiscent of the point when Marcel Duchamp enters into an inventor's fair with the roto-reliefs, trying to operate as an inventor and trying to place his product in a completely new sphere.
I don't think he sold anything,
Nothing,
right?
no.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess I come from an art dealing background. I worked for galleries before I went back to graduate school, so I had some sense of how to sell things, but maybe I was just more lucky than Duchamp. I don't know. And also, I mean, it seemed when I started the project, it seemed like it was going to be very difficult to do, but it actually wasn't. It was very easy to do over the internet. I mean, I had access to a manufacturer. I had a website, and there was a lot of kind of publicity that came out on the internet, and it became a really important tool. Maybe he would have done better if he had internet.
A website,
Yeah.
But you mentioned all these metaphors that are there within the glasses, and I think those are really interesting to unpack, because even though you say they're not art, and they are this product, and they're just this kind of parallel aspect of the kind of work you're doing, it nonetheless is something that controls how we see. It frames everything around us. It becomes this obvious lens through which we're going to see everything. So in a way, you've kind of created a total perceptual filter.
Well, yeah. I mean, sunglasses can mean a lot of things. Like, people wear them when they want to hide, but they also wear them when they want to be noticed. And they're like, in some ways, they're like a mask. And I liked all of those kind of associations that they have as an object. But also, yes, they're just essentially frames and lenses. And the idea of framing artworks by using a context or by naming them as artworks is something that I was thinking about when I was thinking about what to do with myself and my time as a graduate student. So I liked that frames and lenses, kind of the key components of this object, but also kind of major themes for me and how I was thinking about art. So.
Well, I wonder, maybe we go into talking a little bit about As It Lays, and then we zoom out to some of your installation-based work.
Okay. Oh yeah, those are the glasses on me.
Those are the glasses.
She brought her own, so.
So, yeah, I mean, As It Lays is a project that everyone can see online. There's a website for it. You can see it on YouTube. And I explained it a little bit in the introduction. And something that, for me, I mean, it's a bit of maybe a cynical thing, but I always felt that the project had something of this feeling I was having of that the 21st century is going to be known for the end of fame. And in a way, As It Lays, just because of the way the culture machine works and how fast everything gets produced and consumed, we'll have, like, Lindsay Lohan will be the last celebrity. And so I just was thinking, As It Lays has this real kind of anthropological function as a way of imagining a different kind of portraiture, but also looking at fame as a material in itself.
Well, I hope Lindsay Lohan's not the last celebrity, but but before I just had a thought that before maybe we get into this subject, do you have anything about rough winds on here?
About what?
Rough winds?
No, I don't.
Okay, well, maybe I should just mention this briefly, because it's something that happened around the time of my sunglasses that led to As It Lays. So I wanted to present my glasses as a fully formed brand and an idea. And I decided to do that by creating a kind of soap opera, like a web series that I shot in LA. And it was about these kind of young adults and how they were navigating the world, and they were all wearing the glasses that I had made. And it launched at the same time as the sunglasses brand. And I really enjoyed that form, the serial form, making something just to be distributed on the internet. So it wasn't, it wasn't a precious thing. And looking back on Rough Winds after it had ended, I looked at it and I thought, oh, well, what this really is a landscape. It was all about the city of LA. And then I thought to myself, well, how can I use a similar format and try to tackle this, daunting idea of portraiture. And that's how As It Lays really developed. It was, for me, a way of thinking about how to make portraits. So yes, it was a serial televisual artwork, and there ultimately ended up being 33 individual video portraits. And each subject was someone who was a celebrity, someone who was recognized in culture, and specifically in LA as someone who kind of contributed to the fabric of LA culture. So that's how all those people were selected. But I don't know. I mean, I really don't. I don't know. I don't know if I agree with you about this idea of the death of celebrity.
It's just.
I think maybe it just finds a new way to exist. I mean, now people can be celebrities if they're not talented. So.
I don't think it has the same longevity. Oh, you're right about that.
But I don't know. I mean, we'll see. We don't know yet. I mean.
And so, can you talk a bit about the way you're trying to unpack these personalities? I mean, because it's a very unconventional interview format, what you're setting up.
Yeah, well, when I was thinking about it and I was starting out, I thought, well, how am I going to really get at the essence of portraiture? And portraiture, I always thought of it in the traditional sense as kind of capturing someone's likeness, their personality, or some glimmer of them that's very authentic and real. And I thought, well, in order to achieve that and to do something contemporary, I would use this talk show format but alter it and make it more geared at this idea of getting someone's likeness. So the first thing I did was I stripped away all the kinds of questions that you would normally ask someone in this format. So I don't ask any hot button questions. I didn't ask any personal questions. I just went with questions that anybody could answer. And that was the first important step. And then the second thing was that I didn't ask any follow-up questions. And the reason I didn't was because I didn't want to pry. I didn't want the person I was interviewing to feel that they had to give me more if they didn't want to. So it was up to them how much they wanted to answer, or whether or not they, what they were comfortable revealing. So that it could really be about them and about how they wanted to be perceived and seen in this situation. And, and I also kind of took a role to be very neutral throughout the process, to make myself as neutral as possible, which goes along with not asking follow-up questions, but it was also just about how I presented myself in this project, so that ultimately, if you saw one or two, you might think I was being funny and I might attract your attention. But if you saw a few of them, I would probably maybe disappear or fade away, so that it really just became about the subject. Because I always wore the same thing and I always had the same look and the same tone. So it could really be focused on the subject. And really, that was another way of focusing on a portrait, or making a portrait of them.
And what about the subject? I mean, I think there's, as I said, it was in the introduction, there's this real sense of the performance of the self that I get out of it. I mean, I think I have personally an expectation that celebrities will be a caricature of themselves somehow. And I wonder if you could say anything about the truth to the persona that came through in asking questions that weren't going to be the canned things that they're normally used to.
Well, I think every single one was different, but I felt like every single one was successful, because if someone wanted to give me a lot, then they did, and if someone wanted to perform, then they did, and it was a matter of whether or not they wanted to keep their guard up or not. But I think that revealed something about them, whether they got real or whether they kept a distance.
Right.
So I always felt like there was something to be learned about each person, about who they were, based on how they reacted.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it ever resulted in caricature, though?
In caricature?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think so. Because, I mean, someone taking on the role of caricature is also part of their character.
Right. Right. And you always give them this last word. You always ask them the same last question, which is, what can
so
would you like the world to know about Marilyn Manson?
In other questions that were pretty random, I didn't get to, they might not have gotten to cover what they really wanted to reveal, so I allowed them that opportunity at the end. Yeah.
And what about this? I mean, there is this definite perceived irony or potential sarcasm that other critics have seen in the piece. I mean, and this, I guess, comes back in a way to this idea of caricature. But I wondered if that somehow, you seem very sincere in your approach. But I just wondered what you might have to say about that.
Yeah. Well, in addition to wanting to find a way to make portraits, I also wanted to kind of look at the city and look at the people who I felt had contributed to it in a special way, or in a way that was meaningful to me and to my work and to my thinking about, everything. So, so it was really about people who I respected and admired, I might not show it, but I was definitely very nervous and intimidated by some of the people that I got to talk to.
You said something, we did a version of this in Utah in August, and you said something hilarious, that you don't listen to their responses.
Yeah, well, I got really nervous when I was doing the talk, so in order to not laugh or to not break down during the interviews, I would just kind of zone out. I mean, I would hear them, and I would hear the sound of their voice, and when the sound of their voice would stop, then I would ask the next question, but I actually couldn't allow myself to listen to what they were saying. So when I watched them back, that was really the first time I heard their responses.
Let me see what the next slide is.
Yeah, so there's the set.
Right. And this somehow then leads right into your installation-based practice, which is fairly layered. I mean, I wonder if we could talk first about the flats.
Okay.
Which you're very clear are not paintings.
Well, they're just not. I mean, they're flats, and I first made them when I was in grad school, actually, as a potential prop or backdrop for my sunglasses, because I was doing campaigns and thinking about how to present the glasses, and I decided, no, I'm going to wait, and I'm going to use them for this other project that I was starting to think about, which turned into As It Lays. So they're made as set pieces. And they were first made for As It Lays, and in order to make them, I went to Warner Brothers in Burbank, to the studio, and I spoke with the set design department, and it's called The Mill, where they make all the sets, and they decided that they were willing to work with me, and we built these 4 arches and this big backdrop behind them. These things were made in the same way that sets are built for TV shows and for other things, and on the back of each one it says "Made at Warner Brothers." But I designed them and had them made exactly how I wanted, and then it was something that then became an autonomous work for me. So I kind of took them out of the set and into other contexts, but I always feel like they're serving the same function that they did in the set, like they're there to frame something, or to outline something. Even when they're on a wall in an art fair or in someone's home, I feel like they kind of determine a space in front of them that acts as a kind of performative space, or that's somehow activated, either by someone walking by or some object that might be put there, and in other installations, I've used them, and then I've placed objects in front of them to kind of fulfill this same idea.
Why get it made at Warner Brothers?
Because that's where you get sets made. Yeah.
But you still get the flats made at Warner Brothers, right?
Yeah.
But what's the attraction?
Well, I really like that that they're flats, and that they should be made in an authentic way by people that make flats. And I wasn't interested in kind of making my own version of a Hollywood object so that I could kind of take a stance of distance from Hollywood. I really want to be in it. Like, I want to be engaging with it directly. And so it makes the most sense for me and for my work to actually use the facilities that are used by art directors who create television sets. So.
But we didn't mention it in the beginning, but an early part of Alex's career, he was working with Jason Rhodes, and it seemed like that had quite an influence on the way you maybe think about the things you're doing now. Because you spoke about this idea of this magic, or the charisma, and the approximation of it that comes out of having something associated with that.
That's true, yes, and I forgot to mention that. But one thing that I think Warner Brothers as a brand gives the work is a little bit of like stardust, this thing that you can't see, but you kind of know it's there. It's like it's a little bit of Hollywood magic, and I think that magic is a really important part of entertainment culture, but it's also an important part of art, and the way that certain things that are deemed artworks carry a magical presence. And so I like the idea of matching these things up, combining the magic of Hollywood with the magic of art. And yes, I worked for Jason Rhodes, who was an amazing artist and was really inspirational for me. And we worked on a project together where he built this amazing sculpture called Black Pussy, and he asked me to help him organize a series of events inside the sculpture, and those events were called Black Pussy Soiree Cabaret Macrame. And the goal for Jason of these events was to trap the charisma of all the people that came to these events in the sculpture, so that after the events were done, the sculpture would carry this like ineffable aura or quality of charisma. And that was something that stuck with me. So I've always been really sensitive to like feeling it or looking for it or thinking about it and how to cultivate it. And yeah. Well, yeah,
so what we're looking at here is your statements booth at Art Basel last June.
Yeah.
And the contents in the booth, in addition to the flats, are props, right?
Yeah.
So they come from Babelsberg in Berlin, or?
Yeah, this was done in Switzerland, and the studio in Berlin seemed like the best place to go and get Hollywood props, because they do shoot a lot of big budget Hollywood films in Babelsberg Studio, which is outside of Berlin. So I went there and I looked for objects to place as sculptures in this installation. So I use props sometimes as sculptures, so during the installation they play the role of sculpture, but at the end of the show they go back to just being props. And picking them is a lot like casting. It's like casting the actors who are going to stand in front of these backdrops and perform.
Right, and you just said a lot of things there that I think we could look at. One is you're not claiming these items. You very much want to just borrow them and then put them back into circulation, back into storage, essentially, because you really distance yourself from the idea of ownership.
That's not true at all. Actually, I see myself as taking temporary ownership of them.
Okay.
Of naming them, of putting them on pedestals, of titling each individual prop, of really declaring them to be sculpture. And then when that time period ends, then they go back.
Right, but I mean...
So they're not permanently my sculptures, and they can't be owned. And yes, you're correct about that. But for a small period of time, they get to be my artworks, or I make them my artworks.
How do your gallerists feel about that? That they have this kind of, situation that you've set up that will be ultimately temporary. So when they're, I don't know, I'm just wondering, because I think the normal path would be to buy that stuff off of eBay and then, sign it.
One way to think about it is like as a performance. It's like a performance. And these things are performing the role of sculpture, and then they go back. So I think that it's just a part of my practice, and that's something that the gallerists just have accepted, and it's just part of the work.
They roll with it.
Yeah. Well, they have to.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I like this idea of performing the role of your sculptures. What was I going to ask you?
Well, they're like Hollywood people, except that they're Hollywood objects. So.
And they're there in a sense to emphasize the flats, or it's I mean, it seems like there's a funny codependence that goes on with the flats and the objects.
It's like on a stage you have a backdrop and you have a foreground and a background, and so we have both. I have both elements together here, and it's a lot like, in some ways, like painting, like making art with a figure and a ground relationship.
So but in a sense, it's quite controlled terms of consumption. I wonder how that works later. You know, or is it just at the discretion of the collector to create their own situation?
Yeah, I like that some people will take it upon themselves to kind of restage a kind of scene or a tableau with their flat and an object that they choose, or sometimes they won't. And some people will just see them as an abstract thing, and that's okay. But for me, like, they'll always charge that space in front of them, whether there's an object there or not. Like, if someone just happens to walk by at that moment, then there's something happening.
Right. I wonder, maybe we go to another slide. This is a recent exhibition you've done at the Museo Civico Diocese in...
It was in Umbria.
In Umbria,
in Italy.
Exactly. And this is, it seems, would be an incredibly difficult place to do anything. I mean, it's in terms of competing with the place itself, but yet you've enhanced it quite a bit.
Well, what I did was I went to Cinecitta, which is the famous Roman film studio, and I went there looking for props. And I found amazing things that kind of fit within this context of this Baroque church quite smoothly. I mean, in some cases, you'll see things and you're not going to be sure if it's a prop or not. Right. But I liked the relationship these objects had within the space. So this was very much a site-specific situation, but I dealt with the same kinds of ideas. Mm-hmm. And there were some flats that were also made that were freestanding, that were positioned behind objects, so that they had that same kind of foreground and background relationship. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then there were also, there was also a few that were put up into these circular spaces where there used to be a Baroque painting of some kind that's no longer there. But yeah, there were certain angles, not in this picture, where they really framed the figures in front of them. And you can see, like, is it on the right? Yeah, on the right side, there's a figure that's part of the church. And then in the center, this figure was a rented figure, a prop that was made out of fiberglass. But it fit very seamlessly into the scene. Sure.
And last night in Salt Lake City, we opened an exhibition of Triple Candy, and their work is about creating situations through props, placebos. Actually, you guys have a lot of the same vocabulary in a funny way of how one can create a situation through, either in their case in a very didactic fashion, or in yours the momentary pairings of objects.
They do a lot of replicas, right? Fakes and replicas.
Yeah. I mean, they don't refer to them exactly as replicas. They're more props and surrogates. But I guess, but the same thing kind of happens, like what we saw in the Paris Projects booth, where you're setting up a situation, and then ultimately it's just there for that moment, and yet it seems made of the components that should be able to carry on. I guess I don't have a point with that. Maybe we go to your recent exhibition at Elmine. Oh, here's another.
Oh yeah,
shot
so
there.
This was a figure that was used as like a body double for what's the actress's name? I'm blanking, but from La Dolce Vita, when she's dancing in the fountain. Anita Ekberg. Thanks, China. Yeah. And also just a fiberglass. Everything in the show was made of fiberglass and foam, but it was all kind of painted to look authentically made out of stone or something more substantial. So you could really see on these works the kind of the kind of fakeness of their own propness. And I like that quality about them.
Right.
When you got up close, that they had that patina of their use in cinema, but they also have this really pronounced propness.
Right. This is your recent show at Elmine Rec?
Yeah.
This is one of the better images I could find online, so sorry it's a bit blurry. But I think it, in a weird way, brings us right back to the sunglasses, because now the frame is completely dissolved, and you've now are, in this case, consuming the whole exhibition space with the flat technique.
Yeah, well, this was very similar to the backdrop that was behind the flats in As It Lays. So I used the same image that I used to create that backdrop to create this installation. And I basically had the entire gallery blanketed, and I had the painter from Warner Brothers come to Paris, and he worked directly in the gallery with me to kind of figure out this whole mural. And and it was a completely encompassing environment. And within it, there were just 4 props. It was very pared down, and it was very surreal. It was like I feel like it was, much more maybe more environmental than other things that I'd done, and maybe it was like looking at the world through one lens or through one pair of sunglasses or something like that.
Right. And can I ask, what was for sale?
Nothing. Yeah. So.
That's challenging. That's a reminder to look at the time. Okay. So this is my last slide, which is an Instagram of your...
Instagram. Yeah.
of your Venice Beach Biennial project. And it'd be really nice to just have an introduction to that, because this is quite an impressive feat.
Oh, sure. We went to Easter Island, and we borrowed 4 sculptures, and we brought them to Venice Beach for the Venice Beach. No, I'm just kidding. These were also props, and they were made for a music video for Janet Jackson in the 90s for a song called Runaway. You may remember she's dancing on all the different monuments, and she's going like on the Great Wall of China, and then she ends up at Easter Island at one point, and they built these giant Easter Island head replicas. And I'd always seen them in the prop house because I go to the prop house regularly to get ideas and to look for potential candidates for sculptures. And I always thought, oh, well, this is something that I need to work with at some point. And I was asked to be in the Venice Beach Biennial, which was this summer, and it was organized by the Hammer, and it was a biennial that was going to happen on the beach. And I thought, oh, well, this is the perfect opportunity to do an installation with props on the beach and to use these for foam heads. So just like in the other installations, I rented them, and temporarily they became my artwork, and then they went back to storage at the end of the show.
And I only recently learned that for the Venice Beach Biennial there was this effort to make things slightly subliminal in a way. I mean, I heard they had these little green balloons to identify the art versus the non-art, but I think that's a really interesting situation to potentially be working with. Most of these gestures feel very strong and present, but based on talking about this reverse Duchampian method, or is subliminal,
Bless you,
making things more subliminal, something you're interested in? I mean, in this case, it would seem like something that maybe the city of...
Well, I like that they felt like they were meant to be there in some way, because, they were back at the beach, which is where they were originally made, or where they exist as real sculptures as opposed to fake ones. So they blended in really well. And this was similar to kind of how I was thinking about the project in Italy, about finding these objects that kind of fit perfectly and blended into that context. So I like that. I like that I don't know, they were integrated in some way. They felt like they were meant to be there to a lot of people. And a lot of tourists kept coming up to them and taking pictures as if they were something that you're supposed to take a picture with if you're a tourist at Venice Beach. And that was something fun to see happen throughout the course of that brief show. So.
And just my last question is, how's the evolution of your relationship with the Prop House and Warner Brothers? What do they think of you at this point?
Well, I think that they're happy because I keep giving them work to do, and like anything else, they're a business, and they're a fabricator, and
Right.
whether they're making a set for, a sitcom, or they're making something for me, it's for them. It's about the bottom line, and they're happy. They enjoy it, and they've given me. I'm really excited because I got an official parking pass last week. I was always having to call in and make an appointment to park there, but now I don't have to do that. So I guess they're happy with me. I don't know.
Great.
But,
Well, maybe we could open it up to questions?
yeah,
or?
we can. Sure. Anyone have questions? Yeah.
Sure. So as a born and raised Burbank woman,
Oh, cool.
I have to say you clearly got this one right. But I'm particularly curious about the expansion of this. So if Sunglasses, Freeway, LA, what is Chicago? What is Indiana? Is there a different art framework for a different place?
I mean, I think that LA is my subject. It's one of my subjects, and I can't imagine living somewhere else and thinking about another place in this way. So, it's hard for me to answer that. I mean, I think that those are subjects for other artists to work with or to go with. And anyone else? A question? Yeah?
Going back to the what is for sale question, how do you work with collectors? I mean, do they commission from you an installation and then you go and say, copy these props because I'm going to install it in these people's house or a museum?
Well, in some of the exhibitions that I've done, I'll make flats, and then those will remain as artworks after the exhibition ends, and those will be placed or sold to collectors in that way. So that's one of the types of things that I make. And I also have just started making sky backdrop paintings, like the one that I made for the set of As It Lays. It's another kind of object that's come out of this practice that's something that that remains and that someone can acquire.
Which is what we can see here
Yeah,
at the
and
fair.
there's one in the fair. There's one at the booth of Almin Resch Gallery. So you could go take a look at that if you want. But yeah, a lot of the things that I make, they're performative. They don't get to be sold and they can't be acquired. So is that it?
Great.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming. Thank you. Thanks.